Today we are talking to farmers to understand exactly what it takes to be a farmer. What does it mean to be a farmer? What is involved in being a farmer and being able to farm lands like this, vast lands at a commercial scale? What do you need? What skills do you need? What challenges do you face? But equally, what common problems do you share with others? And how do you get resourced, both in terms of skills, but also in terms of knowledge of your area that you are? So today, one of the things that we are seeking to get out of this conversation is ways that we can inform other farmers to do better and to be able to farm chickpeas, to be able to farm barley, to be able to farm beans, and share what the common problems are, and be able to bring farmers together and teach the skills that they already have, share it across. Most farmers grapple not just with the weather, but also they grapple with the economic situation. They grapple with the economic modeling of farming. What is it that we can learn from this farmer that you can also take from this and replicate in your own farm, and so be able to make great strides? So skills are skills if they can be shared and implemented across a wide community. That is what makes a difference. But if you get this skill and you sit on it, you won't be able to change. So what we are going to get from this farm, showing significant yields as we are seeing here, is going to be vital to you if you're interested in farming chickpeas, if you're interested in farming what they are farming. But equally, farmers have a social life. So it is important that you also learn from that social life and understand what challenges they go through. What do they mean bedtimes? What sort of things constitute bedtimes for them? Like any bedtime comes, bedtime goes, and it will be always replaced with a good time. What does a good time mean for a commercial farmer? Join me in this conversation. And if you like this video, please subscribe so you can always get stories of farmers who are making it. We're visiting this farmer because they are making it. They are killing it, as people would call it. You farm over a number of years. There are things that keep cropping up that you manage to deal with that can inform the newer generation on how you work around it. So the first area that I want to talk to you about is about technology. Why are you where you are in relation to technology? How has technology helped you to be where you are?
Yeah, technology definitely makes farming easier now. So for instance, before we had GPS in tractors, so it's a very big expense to go into. But before we had GPS, we had you use more fuel, more seed, more spraying. So you use more chemicals. But now with GPS, it's 2 centimetre accuracy. So then that now cuts back your fuel, cuts back your time, and cuts back your spraying. And then now we've gone into robotics. So everything's robotic. Camera sprays. So what that does, that saves chemical. So through summers, it only sprays where it sees that weed, and that's it. So you're spraying 100% of a paddock, you're back down to 5% of a paddock. So that in itself, through summer, saves you a phenomenal amount of chemical, amount of time, and amount of money.
Just take me back, sorry to cut you, on GPS. Yeah. There are some farmers who might not know what GPS is. Tell me more.
So GPS is a satellite. Part of having a tractor, you have a screen and it's satellite, connected satellites, and it's called control for traffic. We sort of mainly they've gone to that stage where you're on the same lines year in, year out. And then what it does, comes from your satellite down, and then you have your line, and it'll say if you're sowing at 18 metres, it'll stay to that within 2 centimetres every time of that line. And so you're in the same spot constantly, year in, year
So
out.
you're pretty much growing your crop on the same spot you grew last year.
Yep.
Is that the point?
So we do control traffic. So our tractors, our spray rigs, everything like that run in the same line, year in, year out, because what that does is less compaction across your soil. So it has that same line. So only the compaction's in one spot of your farm.
So what's the advantage of that?
So compaction, if you drive across different lines, we find here, because our soil shows it up, you'll have different yields in those areas. So if you'll see a tractor line that way, you'll see that year in, year out, because it compacts the soil, and then you'll see that your crop won't grow that well in that sort of part of the world. Yeah.
So are you suggesting that the idea of success comes from pretty much growing your plant exactly where you grow?
Well, it's sort of, yeah, minimising your compaction in soils out here. So different soils are different types, but our soil here stores a lot of moisture, and if you drive in every year, if you went every 5 metres over, you will see that last year's track in your sowing. So by keeping it in one line together, it minimises compaction to one area. So that sort of, and allows water then to get into the subsoil moisture, and then allows everything to grow on that sort of side. So yeah, and then so GPS does that, and then now we're going robotics. So it's an autonomous tractor platform, and it drives itself. So this way we're cutting back from labour time. We're going back to smaller horsepower. So once again, then you're better in front of the environment, and then using less chemicals with a chemical sprayer. Same again. So it's a technology we've bought into, which is expensive enough, but it'll save us money within the first year or two. It'll nearly pay for itself going forward.
Can you take me to the type of crops that you grow on this farm, and why? Why do you grow those types of crops, and how does those type of crops inform the choice of technology?
So we grow mainly wheat, canola, chickpeas and fava beans, our main sort of stable one, and we go on a rotation. Every year we rotate, so we don't go back to back in wheat because it's disease and whatnot, problems. So we rotate our legumes. So if a wheat paddock's in wheat, next year it'll go to canola, chickpeas or fava beans, and rotate sort of on that way. But yeah, by different types, like we're mainly farming, that's what we are. And by going to that technology, what we're talking about, what it does, it'll store moisture in the dry times. So we're always keeping weeds down, minimum, because weeds suck your moisture out. So by going to that technology, it maintains our countries clean. So when we do get the rain event, we're maximising our yield potential on that country, pretty much.
Let's look specifically into the technology. If you were to be asked what type of, or mention one type of equipment that you're using on your farm that you think this is a game changer so far, or considering all the previous?
Robotics, by far. So by going to an autonomous tractor platform, that going forward in farming is by far the biggest thing in the future. Yeah, we have it, yeah. So we've invested into that. So we had one, now we've invested into it twice, like bought another one. And that there, what it does a lot of things on a farm. We find in a dry time, you can still maintain your moisture because it's not costing you much to control your weeds, where some farmers might go, it's dry, we've got no income coming this year, why keep the weeds off? We're autonomous platform where we're not sitting on the tractor, so it's not man hours, it robotically drives itself, and then that saves you time, it saves you money because you're maintaining your weeds going forward. And look, it's technology. I think what it does too, we've got full-time employees, so we've got them doing extra jobs rather than sitting on a tractor for 7 days a week or whatever. So we're actually getting more productivity out of our farm because they're not sitting on a tractor doing that side of things. And I think, and what it does, it opens a whole new world to someone who might be not interested in agriculture, but who are interested in that sort of the technology. So someone from Sydney who might not be interested in farming but loves the idea of a robotic tractor might then go, oh, this is a good idea. So it just gives you a whole different picture of someone in agriculture, I think. So it gets someone who's might not select agriculture but loves technology, and I think that's where technology in farming will explode, because it broadens the whole, or we could say whole of Australia, to one, back to agriculture.
So take me to the time before you had this robotics onto your farm.
Yep.
What has changed now in terms of saving?
So before, we used to be sitting so years ago, so when my father was farming, whatever, in a drier period, you probably wouldn't keep as many weeds as back, but you might have a paddock, might be one chunk of weeds here, so you'd spray them. In 3 weeks' time, you might go back and then you'd spray that chunk of weeds. So when we went to a camera sprayer, which is an infrared LED light with cameras, and so as you go over the weed, there might be one weed there and 2 metres is another weed. So it'll just spray that one weed and it'll spray that one weed. That's it. So it doesn't spray 100% of the paddock. So you're only spraying, so your savings are phenomenal, because you're going from spraying 100% of a paddock back to about 5%. So that makes it, it makes us look a bit more like we are looking for the future, because we're sort of saying using less chemicals and that sort of stuff. By doing this camera technology and using that technology, you're using less chemicals. So then we sort of started going to these cameras, and then what happened then was you're spending hours and hours on tractors. Repayment to tractors are expensive, so you're putting more hours on your tractor. And so by now we're going to an autonomous platform, we're putting less hours on the bigger expensive tractors and going back to a tractor before, what we used to drive with it was 350 horsepower. Now we're back to 75 horsepower.
Mm. Okay.
So your fuel economy, pollution, it's just everything's cutting back. Mm. So you're looking more sort of environmental impact in a way, and you're actually improving that because you're going back to less chemicals and less diesel consumption on that side.
I want to move to a section of the economics of farming.
Yep.
I've heard different models about how to make money in farming and why everyone should do farming. In fact, somebody was so enthusiastic about farming to the extent that they were saying farming is the best thing.
Yeah.
Where is the economics, according to you, of farming?
Well, I think it's getting a lot expensive, because as a farmer now, you're buying everything as a high commodity, so fertilizer, freight, chemicals. But when you sell as a farmer, you're probably pretty much half the time selling as a low. Like you're selling it. There's so many people taking money out of you before you even sell the grain, and that's the thing with farming. I don't think it's not for the money. Like if you look at that Jeremy Clarkson's farm, the Diddley Squat, I think that shows it how it is. But to make money is to go to these technologies to keep it cheap. So the cheaper you can keep it before you put your crop in the ground is more profit back in yours pocket. And then our biggest thing is we store grain. Like as I was saying before, you might go sowing, you think chickpea price might be $1,000 a tonne. So what everyone does, everyone then will go and sow chickpeas. But so many people are sowing them, by the time you get to harvest, the price might be $500 a tonne. So instead of just selling it on the market on the day because you have to, sometimes you do, but we've invested heavily in storage for that reason. We store it, and then that way when the price comes back up, we can then cash in on that price going forward on economy.
I want you to talk me through to the young generation who are wanting to get into farming. And we're going to hear you, especially with your experience of farming. What is it that should encourage them, given the fact that it's becoming expensive to farm anyway? So they say, why should I?
There's no money in it. I don't know. It's a love. It's a lifestyle. It's probably the lifestyle. Look, big hours, big days. You miss some family time, but that's probably going back to that autonomous platform. Is if we can invest heavily in that, you get the family time back because it's driving by itself. But it is rewarding some days when you pull off a crop or whatever. It's rewarding in that time. But as we were saying before, farming generations are getting older. If you haven't got the luxury of having a family farm and then joining that family farm, it's very hard to get into agriculture because land prices are so expensive now. And your cost of running a farm, what it was 10 years ago, is probably nearly doubled in the price because of, as we were saying before, fertiliser is expensive, sprays are expensive, labour, machinery is, since COVID, doubled in price. Like you got all those factors you got to put in, going forward. So it's not, I think you got to have the love for it before you start. Like we're lucky, so I'm fourth generation on this farm, so we're over 100 years.
Okay. Wow.
So my kids will be fifth if they ever come back and be fifth generation. So it's sort of, you're very lucky in a way.
So you grew up on this farm?
Yeah.
And you sort of grew up learning and seeing.
So you learn
along the way.
Yeah. So every generation had their thing. Like every generation, as a farming family, you farm for the next generation in a way.
Okay.
So we're not farming to make a maximised profit as we can, but you're trying to farm to make it sustainable for the next generation. So when the next generation comes, they're not starting from the bottom. So we're investing heavily in, starting probably in the last so many years, in fertiliser. Predominantly up here, we're not a fertilising country because it's quite a new farming, but we're actually putting the money into fertiliser, say, to try and leave the place in a better place than what we got it from generation. So every generation seems to do that. And you can see from any generation, we used to be heavily, before my time, was stock. A lot of stock, no farming. And then through the years with the stock, with the wool, when the wool market shit itself, when the wool market collapsed, they had to find a new way of making an income. So everyone went farming and went into farming and that way. And then,
Let's move on to your soil, the soil that is in this area that you are. Obviously, I see you do chickpeas. Tell me something about the soil. Why are you doing chickpeas?
Well, they're very good legumes rotation, so very good for the soil. So that's why we rotate with chickpeas. And they can be funny. Like as we said before, they can be worth a lot of money. 2 or 3 years ago, you couldn't even get $300 a tonne for them. Today, you could get $900 to $1,000 a tonne. They're the price. It's very price driven with the chickpea. We're very lucky with the soil. Like as I say, it's sort of fairly new country, and we can store a lot of subsoil moisture here. So you can store up to sort of 6 foot with the soil. So that's why maintaining weeds, keeping your country clean is such a huge thing. So they're talking about taking different chemicals away. And if you take those different chemicals away, that then buggers us going forward because we can't maintain our country to keep the moisture what we want, to grow the crops what we want. That's the biggest issue. If, here in different parts of the world, they've taken different chemicals away. And I think in Australia, because we're such a variable climate, we need to keep the chemicals what we know what works best to maintain our ground, to then potentially in those dry times, we profit more, like you profit. So in the dry times, you're keeping it clean and tidy. So when you actually have a good season, you can then profit, store some grain for the dry time. So it's trying to maximise that good years, maximise them for the bad years. So if we can maximise, grow as much grain as we can, store as whatever we can, to then allow us in the dry times, not to worry about a government or anything like that, we can then maintain ourselves going through.
Okay, I want you to talk to a younger farmer who doesn't know about the costing for farming.
Yep.
What do they need to have first to be able to make it? Obviously, they need they need a farm.
A farm, that's one thing.
But what else do they need to be able? So there are two things. They need land, but what else do they need, and what economics do they need to keep in mind? Because You keep saying that the moisture is variable.
It's variable.
That means you need to be
Well,
on the pace with something. You need to track something.
I think with a young person, I think you got to realise that it's not rose. Like, you got to work hard, and you might work your butt off, and you might get nothing at the end of the day. That's the way it is. Like, but I think you got to realise that when it's a good season, don't think it's a good season every day. You have to then store what you can for a bad time. That's the biggest thing out here. If you can, like it might be all rose. You think it's all rose and you're going well, but you have to store, and you just got to be, like, you can't slack off in a way in farming. Like, it's easy in a drought to go, well, I'm not going to spend any money, but my place is covered in weeds. Out here, they always say you only grow one crop a year. So if you grow a weed crop, well, you're not going to get a profitable wheat crop. So that's the biggest thing. Like, I think if you're going to say to someone, if they're going to come farming, don't slack off in the dry time. You have to maintain your place just as much as in a good time.
How do you structure your season in general?
In general?
Yeah.
Look, I think, like, as I say, like,
is there a time that you will relax and say, oh, this month I'll just be relaxed, nothing?
No. And probably not to go back on it, but that technology with robotics, it allows you to have that relaxed time.
Okay.
Because you're still maintaining everything. Like with this machine, we see it once a day. 1 hour a day. All I've got to do is fill it up, check it over, and it'll sit away and it'll spray. So that allows me then in my dry time that I know, one, I'm maintaining the paddock, and two, that something's getting done. So then I can then go, righto, if the kids have got sport on, I can then leave the farm and go and do that. Like, it's sort of, I think technology is such a huge thing going forward, where it gives you that mentality where you can then relax.
Because there's a mentality that I also heard from the younger person on one of the farms, was saying, farming is not like you set like a business where you set small and grow with it.
Yep.
You have to set big. I can't get the money from the bank to buy a big farm.
Yep.
Is that true?
Yeah, probably is true. Because you can't just go to a farm now, because the country's worth so much money now. To go and buy, say, 5,000 acres, you might need 12 to 15 million. As a young farmer, if I walk in and I've never farmed before, is a bank going to allow you that much money? No.
Probably not, yeah.
No. And the thing with that is then your interest rate on that alone, like, you're nearly paying, what, you'd be up to, $1 million probably of interest before you know it, before you even start. That's the biggest thing with farming, I always find, is your outlay is so huge at the start. Before you even get to harvesting, you've just outlaid all your money.
While you are there, is there a proportion or a ratio that you could say this outlay is related to the size of the farm, obviously? Is it like, for example, you have to spend like 50% of your investment before you get anything, or what is the ratio like?
Well, at the moment, you're probably spending anywhere from, say, depends what crop it is. You might be spending $400 to $700 a hectare. So you're outlaying that from spraying, sowing, chemicals, fertilizer. So you start doing that in summertime, and harvest time is not until November. So you could be sitting there for 11 months of the year until you get any income. That's probably the biggest thing these days, is you're outlaying so much more. Even on a small farm, it's the same. You're outlaying such big money before you even get anything. So then you sort of, if you have so you might outlay that money at the start, you're sowing, you're putting everything into it, and it turns dry. So at the start, you're thinking potentially we might grow 4 tonnes a hectare. So you need to grow 2 tonnes a hectare just to cover cost. But because if the year turns, you mightn't even grow 2 tonnes a hectare. So you mightn't even cover cost before you even start. So it's sort of, farming is a very hard one in that way. You're outlaying so much in front before you even get to the end game, sort of thing. It's probably worse than gambling, as they say. You don't gamble when you're in front, because you gamble every day, because you're throwing money at chemical fertilizer every day and wages before you hit the end game.